Welcome back to Pop Culture Therapy. I'm Advent Nebula.
And I'm Cruellica Kain.
And this time we're talking about Parasite and how it's an honor for a film that's foreign to finally get a true, real recognition for foreign language. It's not the first foreign film to win Best Picture, but the first foreign language film to get Best Picture. And kind of the few sides of what the reaction's been with this.
And also what a movie like this means for pop culture, just as a film outside of what it means Oscar-wise. I guess the first thing to start with is why the movie is so good. Now, Advent hasn't seen the movie. He knows the dynamic of it. So I'm going to go in more general circumstances, for not only his benefit, even though he knows what the movie is about, but also for all of your benefit if you have or have not watched the film. So Parasite, in general circumstances, is a psychological thriller. I'll leave it kind of basic on that. But it's also about the class system in South Korea. Very similar to what you could say on the American side of the pond, how the class system here. You have essentially, for lack of a better way of putting it, the haves and the have-nots. We're not going to go on lower, middle, and upper class because even in America, I don't believe there is such a thing as a middle class any longer. You have lower class and the upper class, basically the haves and the have-nots. And it's not to say that the have-nots, and I use that term loosely, means they have nothing. It just means they don't have the ease of having everything they want. And that's not to say the haves don't struggle.
It's really from the inspiration on this being the class system divide in South Korea. It speaks to a larger audience because we have the same problem here in this country. And it was refreshing to see that a topic from another country could resonate here in the U.S. as well. Another one that kind of going back, Slumdog Millionaire, the first foreign film to ever win an Oscar, that really encapsulated that time period then when there was still an American dream.
Exactly. It takes so much. And we don't have to Americanize a film. And I know us Americans, if you're foreign, you could probably understand this, at least from the outside perspective of Hollywood films. We Americanize everything. I think that's why we're so guilty as a culture for pop culture of whitewashing at times. And my fear is and I know there's been rumblings, but if this movie were to be made in America, I have fears of how it would be represented because it wouldn't be represented properly.
No, and it'd be more on a political tint as well.
Exactly. That's the one thing I really appreciate about this film. It hints at the political nature of the haves and have-nots, but it doesn't actually throw politics in your face. And I love this movie because for myself, and it's actually one of my favorite movies of 2019, even though I saw it in 2020, because at least out here, very few theaters showed it often enough for you to get there. But nevertheless, the reason why this movie is so good is because, for me, is because of the fact it speaks to struggles I dealt with as a child, of that really being of that have-not mentality, and how the characters handled it. I make this joke when I was younger that I was a great actor, that I knew how to act outside of my lifestyle to fit in with other individuals because that was the only way I could connect, because if I really was myself, the poor white trash kid who was in a very violent and broken home, who's going to want to be friends with that? I have more issues than Flash Comics does. And I know you, Advent, dealt with that coming from a very small town. You didn't have a broken home, but you came from a very small town.
A very small town where everybody was highly religious, and we were a not religious family. So you kind of had to play the religious card, which I gave up around middle school and went, F it, I'm going to be myself. I don't care if it ostracizes me because I really can't stand the hypocrisy.
And you dealt with it in a very different manner. I tried to fit in by being almost two separate individuals where you did not care.
Yeah.
And so this movie speaks to that. It speaks to that. It speaks to the good and bad nature of how haves and have-nots handle a situation and how it's visualized. That's all I'm going to say about the movie, because once again, I really don't want to spoil it because there's so much more to this movie that there are twists and turns that when I watch the movie, I never thought would happen. And this is a movie I can honestly say I watched dozens and dozens of times. So with that said, let's talk about the Oscars. The Oscars have been primarily argued as, I'm trying to say this politely, maybe you'll say it much less politely, very white. And I know these are two white people, well, half gypsy. I'm Polish, so I'm whiter than white.
I'm not just Roma, I also have the Native American blood in me as well.
Exactly. Very few non-white individuals, and I'm not trying to go on the race card, because that is not, well, it's going to be certain elements later, that's not the point. Very few people of color have been honored for what they have done in film.
Not just that, but the female population doesn't get recognized enough.
And no, the gender dynamic is very, very different. There's a huge glass ceiling when it comes to directors.
I'd even argue BAFTA's worse, the British version of the Oscars.
So, I mention that for two reasons. One, as we talked about with Slumdog Millionaire, very few films that were created outside of the traditional scope, and that's not saying that there weren't people of diversity in all those films, because that would be a disservice to every film that has ever won an Oscar, or every person who has ever won an Oscar, and I am not going to take that
A lot
stance.
of it I have to chalk it up to the critics and the people that are part of the movie studios that run the Motion Picture Association's Academy. Yeah. They're more of the problem.
Now, the one benefit I will say for Best Picture, and this is the one argument I will have for individuals who say now Law of Women get noticed for the Best Picture nomination along with the Best Director, is Best Picture of all the categories has the most diversity, because you've had Moonlight, 12 Years a Slave, Slumdog Millionaire. I could go on and on and on and on.
But really, until I want to say about 2005, it was predominantly white. You hadn't had a black actor outside of Sidney Poitier.
And Denzel.
Denzel won it after 2005, but Sidney Poitier before that was the only minority actor to win something outside of
Best Actor.
Best Actor. You had Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress win that, but the major categories. And it wasn't until, I think, 12 Years a Slave before a black director actually won Best Director.
And I know Halle Berry has won. I feel so...
But a lot of these were after 2005.
Well, the one that really was so powerful for me, and I am so terrible because I cannot remember her name, but it's one of my favorite movies of all time, and that's Gone with the Wind. She won for Best Supporting Actress.
The first minority.
The first minority, and this was...
1939.
And this was well before Sidney Poitier. And not to disservice to him either, because he's an incredible actor. I've seen way too many of his movies as well, which is not a bad thing, because they're great. And so we come to 2019, where the world has become so much more diverse, so much more involved, and we had a lot of issues with this particular Oscar season because there were no female directors nominated. Very few individuals of a minority were nominated for any categories. But outside of that, we had something that never happened before. We had, not only did a foreign film win the best international film or best international feature film
and foreign language film.
And foreign language. No, I don't think he won for foreign language or won for best international.
They're the same category.
Yeah, they're the same category technically. But it also won for best original screenplay, best director, and best picture. And
those are some of them. If those are three of the most major categories.
Best picture, best director,
and best screenplay. If you knock those three out of the park, you're guaranteed to be held up for a very long time.
And so, going on to those, I want to focus on one piece of the criticism that has come out. And that is, why have a best international category, which is the best foreign film, if foreign films are allotted to be part of the best picture? I understand the criticism because it does kind of feel like almost like a double dipping for best picture in a way, because you have best international film and best picture. If they win both, it's double dipping for that, because you're not giving the other participants a chance to win, at least for the international aspect. However, I don't think the Oscar nominations board, the people who vote, because it's all, they go through a company, I think it's called PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, which they have been around, and I actually used to staff for them when I was in the staffing world for many years.
I looked up how many members they currently have. They have 780 members now.
And PwC has been around extremely long. They're one of the few, I would say, top tier Fortune, I don't think they're Fortune 500, I think they're Fortune 100 accounting firms in the world. And so they're responsible for collecting all these votes anonymously and categorizing them. Obviously, if we all remember the snafu that happened with Moonlight, was kind of their fault, and they made sure they'd never do it again because people lost their jobs. But I don't think anybody realized this social economical impact that American audiences had with the film. Unlike Endgame, unlike every other film on that list, it played in limited theaters, limited times, and it was not touted as Oscar bait.
And not only that, there is no English dub track for this movie. It is straight Korean with subtitles, which is going to turn a lot of people off, as Amazon reviews have already shown, because it's already out on streaming for right now for you to purchase, and people are angry.
People are very angry, and people have went to the level of not really just racism, and I'm not even going to accuse every single person who's claiming of racism, because that is not fair, because I don't know these people to assume outside of their postings that they're actually a racist.
And I assume it's just some people who refuse to watch something subtitled.
And that's what it is. People are angry that a foreign film, won the Oscars, forgetting that Slumdog Millionaire also won the Oscars, and that's technically a foreign film.
And Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, back in the 90s, almost won Best Picture.
And then you think about the fact that it's a non-English speaking film. A lot of people's comments were, how is it fair for a non-English speaking film to win Best Picture and Best Director?
Yeah. And not only that, you got to go back to BAFTA, which is the week before, which, like I said, is the British version of the Oscars. Parasite was nominated on those. 1917 swept a lot of those. People thinking with that happening that I was going to do the same with the Oscars, but obviously it was Parasite instead.
And it won at the Cannes as well. It actually was the first film to win a unanimous vote since Blue is the Warmest Color in 2013. So everyone has been feeling connected by it. So let's dissect this on the pop culture element real quick. We have a film that speaks to the world at large, because we're all suffering. This is not just an American thing. This is not just a Korean thing. This is everywhere.
It's talking about the class divide between the rich and the people who don't have the luxury that a lot of these people have, but it's also speaking to the fact that even if you have money, you're not happy.
So let's ask this first question for pop culture. How did they get through the Oscars to win? Because when we think, and this is not a disservice to any other films that won, Slumdog Millionaire, people thought it won because it was the easy choice. People said the same thing about 12 Years a Slave, because it's the easy choice, because it's the most social impact.
They did not say that about Moonlighting because they thought it was going to be La La Land.
They did think it was going to be La La Land, but some people did say afterwards that they thought, oh, when it did actually get announced as a winner, oh, they must have done that because they wanted to protect diversity. I don't believe that for any of the movies that have ever won, because I think that's an insult to every single person who's worked on the film. But I can see the justifiable reason. Do you select a movie that essentially is the safe choice because it is saying something with a different voice outside of the Anglo-Saxon voice? Or do you pick something that everyone genuinely loves?
Which, in the case of, I'll go back to 1994, when you had 4 films that all potentially could have been the Best Picture winner. What ones have held up the most? Forrest Gump has not held up, but Pulp Fiction and Shawshank Redemption have held the test of time. So sometimes it's the cultural bubble at the time that's reflecting the culture that causes a lot of these pictures to get picked Best Picture. Another one, let's go back to when Citizen Kane, when In the Valley of Green won Best Picture over It. That's another time where you can go into the cultural bubble at the time.
We can also go on more recent one from the 80s. We can go E.T. versus The Thing. When you think of E.T., the only thing everyone thinks about E.T. is the comment, E.T. phone home, or riding the bicycle across the moon face. Nobody else, if you ask, really knows what's going on with E.T. When you go to the cult classic The Thing, which I know was never ever going to win an Oscar,
it's a comment on paranoia and 80s Cold War at the time.
the reason why I feel as though Parasite won is, yes, one, it is part of that cultural zeitgeist currently. But when you think of other movies that have won because of where it was in the cultural zeitgeist, I look at like movies like Moonlight. When that film won, it was talking about
growing up as a gay black man in southern Florida during the 80s and 90s, which is not a good time for a young black man then.
No, it was exactly. It was talking about how you have to live within your community and connect with people. And yes, you can say that was part of the cultural zeitgeist at that time, which it was. But from talking with many people who have seen it, enjoyed it, it still holds up. When you think about other films that have nothing to do with cultural zeitgeist.
Crash would speak to my mind on that one, which I still don't understand.
I'm thinking of the one that, oh God, I can't remember the name. It'll come to me right when I'm thinking of it. But there's so many films that have won Best Picture that have never connected, that they won it because of the fact that people felt that this is what they want, that it wasn't speaking to the people. And I feel like this year was one of the first years that they took a huge risk and said, you know what, we're going to speak to the population of, okay, Chicago. Yeah, that's one of the movies. I love Chicago. It's one of the greatest musicals of our time.
Which, Gangs of New York is of that year the more remembered film that was up for Best Picture, which was, people thought Scorsese got robbed, but a couple of years later, Departed comes out.
And that's what I'm kind of going on, is Parasite is by no means A, the easy choice. B, with the way it was presented in theaters, it was not presented in a way to overburden, which is what a lot of movies did, like, to be fair, Little Women, that was in your face, hidden, because you saw the posters everywhere, and all you thought of is, okay, it's based off the book.
And it's like, and in my case, I was going, this is what, the fourth or fifth time they've made this movie?
But what I think is a disservice for that particular film, and I think this is why it didn't win, is because everybody thought it was going to be a carbon copy reimagining of the book. However, Little Women is like the book, but they've changed characters. They actually put a little bit of more of a change to how the characters reflect on their personal experiences.
And then what I thought was going to win 1917, because World War films tend to just do so well, especially after BAFTA, it ended up sweeping that.
And I will say there are certain movies in here I don't think technically deserved it, even though I like it. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That could have hit the cultural zeitgeist.
Joker.
I love the Joker, but do I think it should have ever won Best Picture? Not in 100
Joaquin
years.
Phoenix deserved his Best Actor Oscar, but that's really the only nomination I felt that film was really worthy of.
Same thing with Jojo Rabbit. Jojo Rabbit, excellent concept. Do I think it's deserving to win or be nominated? No.
But Best Adapted Screenplay from Tito Watiki? Yes.
Absolutely. So those are the things that you have to think of when you're thinking, does it deserve the win because of the fact that it's an easy choice? It's by no means the easy choice. There were a lot of great options here. It won not really because it's just part of the cultural zeitgeist at this moment. It won because it stood out cinematically compared to its peers.
And really, everything I was nominated against, it was such a standout between everything else, outside of probably 1917, which, like I've been saying, is one of those Oscar safe bet films.
Exactly. Now, when we think of the fact that it's foreign language, this is another argument that people have made. And I know we kind of talked about with Slumdog Millionaire, but I really want to get into the nitty-gritty with this. They said, how dare a non-American movie win the Best Picture Oscar? Let me ask one particular question. This is rhetorical, so I don't expect a true answer from anyone. Do you think every single movie, every single actor, actress, director, everyone who works on these films are American?
It's obviously not. And then you also got to think about the fact there have been pictures that have been made outside of the United States or UK, because we got to think about there have been some UK pictures that have come
Lord
close.
of the Rings.
Yep, which was filmed in New Zealand.
Which has won.
Yeah. There are films that are not American. They're international projects. Encapsulate multiple countries, including with the US, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, like The Lord of the Rings. You have those multicultural films. You have films that have been foreign before Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon that had been nominated even before that, but Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was the first foreign language film to actually have momentum. So the Oscars have acknowledged international films for their worthiness. Just now we're getting to that point in a cultural zeitgeist, and I think it's also helping with how more interconnected we are, that we're likely going to probably see this more in the future as well.
Which I think the reasoning behind it is the fact that I'm assuming from some people's comments, and these are all based on Twitter posts, on Amazon posts, on so many different reviews and so many different comments out there of when I saw the best picture was Parasite, I was excited because it meant the next step in the evolution of filmmaking. We're recognizing filmmakers, film teams, actors and actresses, because when I think a Best Picture has won, I think every single person who worked on that film, all 10 people depending, or all 500 people depending, deserve an Oscar or the right to have some acknowledgement for their hard work. Because even if they were just the caterer, they still had to feed all these people as they were working hard and putting them through situations that they may not be comfortable with, they may not like, they may think, oh wow, this is so beyond my expectations. So we're coming to the next step in our evolution as in pop culture of acknowledging so much more of just our insular world.
And for those people who don't like the aspect of the foreign language but are interested in Parasite, the director did another film before this, Snowpiercer, which touches on a lot of the same ideas that this movie does, but on a single train in the apocalypse. So if you want something that's a hybrid between American and Korean, go watch that film. And then maybe you'll actually be on board to watching this film.
And that's a very good point. That is something that a lot of people really have to take outside of this. When we get to the next eclipse of our pop culture world, it doesn't mean that just because a director does one type of foreign film that he doesn't do anything that is not American related. Think of The Shape of Water won Best Picture.
Yeah.
Guillermo del Toro is not American.
He is from Mexico. He is from Mexico City. But he's lived in America for the last 20 years.
But he has plenty of films that are solely non-English.
Yeah,
Pan's Labyrinth.
I can think of about 3 films he has, other than Pan's Labyrinth, that are just strictly Spanish, that haven't had a U.S. release, that he's just made for his home country.
And when you think of something like that, we already we've been stepping into the international world for many, many, many years.
Yeah. And speaking of Pan's Labyrinth, that also was nominated for Best Picture this year.
Yes, it was. And I was so excited for Guillermo del Toro when he won for Shape of Water, because that was very interesting. It did like a better Abe from Hellboy universe than Hellboy.
And that was also a better love story than Twilight ever was.
That is so very true. But I was very shocked and surprised by the outrage. Not really the applause, because I expected some of the applause, but it was more so the outrage. And it was for people who are cinephiles, who assume that they know everything about movies because they watch movies every other day. I watch 5 movies a day depending on what I'm doing because I work at home. So I guess I'm a cinephile technically. But to have people come at this film for what it is, I felt was an insult to not only the film, but to us as Americans.
Yeah. And going on that too, Snowpiercer, which ties into this, Harvey Weinstein tried to bury the film because he didn't want the film to actually succeed with Snowpiercer, where it eventually succeeded once it hit Netflix. I can only imagine what would be going on if the Weinstein Company still had the rights to do with the director's films. What could have happened to Parasite, which makes me glad that Weinstein no longer has any pull in Hollywood.
And if you want to know who is in Snowpiercer, just to give yourself a little bit more credibility that you can go watch a foreign film, because technically it is, Chris Evans, America's sweetheart.
Yeah, he plays the lead character.
So think of it like that. Think of it, if you need something that's going to connect with you.
There's also Tilda Swinton is in Snowpiercer as well.
Octavia Spencer, John Hurt, Ed Harris. There's tons. It's a very diverse cast. And that's really what I think we needed this year. Yes, we needed significantly more diversity when it comes to the Oscars. I am not going to argue that. I technically do boycott watching the Oscars because, one, I don't want to sink 3 hours into a show that I don't care about as much anymore. I used to. Oh my God. Me and my mom, we made it a party.
I was gaming that night, and then when I saw, oh, what?
That's kind of how I took it. I kept an eye on it because I'm always curious who wins. Not because it changes my mind on loving or hating a film, because I'm still a believer of it is what it is, and I don't give it as much credit because Suicide Squad has an Oscar. Why does Suicide Squad have an Oscar? But that's for another day. However, I was so happy because this turns the page of saying there's so much more out in the world. It does not have to be, quote unquote, Hollywood funded to be deserving. It proves, just like with Shape of Water, because even though it was done by Guillermo del Toro, it's technically considered an indie film. Because that's one thing he's always been known for, is doing more of the
he owns his own studio, which the Shape of Water was shot under.
Yeah, he goes more on the fringes of indie. So you have indie films that win. You have foreign films that win. Now you have foreign language films that win. And while I do agree, if it's going to be nominated for Best Picture, it should not be nominated for Best International Film, because I will agree, as I said in the beginning, that does feel a little bit like double dipping. But I think that was done because nobody believed it would win.
And now we may end up seeing a new category like what happened when Beauty and the Beast got nominated for Best Picture. Then they created Best Animated Feature. You may end up seeing a new category so that if a foreign language film gets nominated for Best Picture, there's an outlier category for the ones so it's not up against those.
Exactly. Because I know there's tons of Best Pictures out there, both American and foreign. And I always hate saying foreign because within the world of pop culture, I feel like we're all united. Within pop culture, there is no them versus us. That's what I love about pop culture. Because the things you like may be different than the things I like. But we have an open platform. We're not limited by borders.
Yes.
We're limited by our own imaginations. And to do a disservice to a film by saying it's undeserving because it's foreign, undeserving because it doesn't have English language, undeserving because it's talking about a topic that may make you feel uncomfortable. Those are all the elements that make pop culture what it is.
It is. Now, going into that, we have a couple future episodes coming up. One, we're going to take a look back at the first season of Fruits Basket before its season comes back rolling around in April.
I'm so excited!
And also another anime you're excited for that I showed you one. I'm the villainess in an Otome game.
Oh, I know!
An isekai show you are excited to watch.
I'm probably going to have to do a solo episode on this because I don't know if you want to listen to this.
I do not want to listen to you talk about your love of Otome games. That'd be like you listen to me talk about iConvolution and some of my stuff.
Yeah, so I might do an episode about Otome gaming and why I find it absolutely hilarious and
the
enjoyable.
fact they now made an anime about the trope you'd be in an Otome game.
Oh my god, I would be the villain in an Ultimate game in a heartbeat. But so I want to talk about those. I also came up with a new episode I want to talk about. We talked about social anxiety and depression prior. However, we're going to be doing an episode, and it's going to be well after the controversy with the stupid Jake Paul. But I want
not just Jake, but Logan Paul, and speaking of Logan Paul and Antonio Brown scheduling that MMA fight.
Yeah, we're going to at least talk about the belief that we can cure social anxiety through the most ridiculous means.
I think Logan Paul, Jake Paul, and football player Antonio Brown have shown social anxiety. Media likes to make fun of it when they shouldn't.
So I think it would be important. Like I said, it's going to be well after the controversy, and that's absolutely fine. That's not the point of it, because I just think it's important to have someone who is suffering from it. And I say suffering very terrible. It's not like it's bad, but we can't get over it. We have to live with it. But I want to refresh on why social anxiety cannot be trivialized, and actually recognizing great anime series that have used social anxiety to tell a fantastic story, that if you feel like you're alone, you have these anime series that you can kind of cuddle up with and feel like you're not alone because there's others who live it both virtually, and the fans who enjoy it can connect with you all at the same time.
Yeah, some of them you may look and laugh at the jokes at some of these, but at the same time, you're going to be able to relate to them even if it's played for laughs like Watamone.
Exactly. Or you can look at on the more serious side of Yuri on Ice.
Or on the depressing side, Welcome to NHK.
Or you can look at it from more of the, I'd say, the friendship side with Sailor Moon. There's so many series out there that have it, and I think it would be an important topic to talk about. And
which we'll probably hit that one in probably when the spring season gets into its full swing.
Yes, so we'll be doing that. So those are kind of like some of our next future episodes coming up. If you, as always, have any suggestions of what you'd like us to talk about, please put it in the comment section. We're always welcome to it. Bye!